January 9, 1945, 3:47 a.m., Hatten, France. The ground beneath Master Sergeant Vito Bertoldo had frozen solid, turning the mud into hard, unyielding ice, yet he remained motionless. Through the broken frame of a once bustling French bakery, he observed dim figures moving through the gray pre-dawn haze. The shapes wore dark steel helmets and carried the characteristic submachine guns of the German army. Hours of tension had left his hands numb from clutching the wooden stock of his .30 caliber machine gun, but instinct took over. His fingers pressed the trigger almost without conscious thought. In his mind, the message he would later send home to his sister in Deca, Illinois, echoed repeatedly. The enemy came in relentless waves, and he lost track after the 40th adversary fell. Those indistinct shadows soon resolved into German soldiers of the Wehrmacht, scouts from the 21st Panzer Division and the 25th Panzer Grenadier Division. These were elite units, hardened in campaigns from the deserts of North Africa to the hedgerows of Normandy. They advanced toward the command post of the 1st Battalion of the 242nd Infantry Regiment, unaware that only a single American sergeant, a man with thick glasses and impaired vision that had nearly kept him out of combat, stood between them and their objective. His determination to hold the line, refusing to yield even an inch, would define the next 2 days as one of the most remarkable feats of solitary defense in modern military history. Berthold, a 28-year-old son of Italian immigrants and a former coal miner from Illinois, faced the daunting task of repelling elements from 2 German divisions. Over those 48 hours, he personally inflicted dozens of casualties on the enemy, incapacitated countless others, and, through sheer resolve, prevented a catastrophic breach that could have compromised an entire section of the Allied front during Operation Nordwind, the last significant German offensive on the Western Front. The operation itself had begun 5 days earlier, on January 4, 1945, when German forces launched a desperate attack intended to reclaim Alsace and split the Allied armies. Hitler personally ordered the offensive, convinced that a decisive strike in Alsace, timed with the Americans' engagement in the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge, might reverse Germany's fortunes. Hatten, a modest town in the Alsace region, was strategically vital, not for its size, but for its location. Controlling it meant commanding the road network that could channel an entire army toward Strasbourg. The Americans understood that losing Hatten would jeopardize the entire Allied defensive line. Among the defenders was Vito Bertoldo. Born to Rocco and Mary Bertoldo, he had grown up in DeKalb, Illinois, amid the hardships of the Great Depression. His father had worked as a coal miner, and after his mother's early death, Vito and his 8 siblings spent time in an orphanage. Before the war, he labored in the mines and drove trucks, a tough upbringing that instilled resilience and grit. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, Bertoldo attempted to enlist immediately, but his poor eyesight led to a 4F classification, barring him from combat duty. The examining physician in Chicago was blunt. "Son, you can barely see past your nose with those glasses. Combat isn't for you." Undeterred, Bertoldo joined anyway in August 1942 as a cook, while persistently petitioning for a transfer to an infantry unit. By the time the Army reconsidered 4F classifications to fill the gap left by heavy casualties after D-Day, Bertoldo was at the forefront of eligible candidates. He was ultimately assigned to Company A, 242nd Infantry Regiment, part of the renowned 42nd Infantry Division, the famed Rainbow Division with a distinguished history dating back to World War I. From the first moments of the German assault in Hatten, Bertoldo's determination and skill would set him apart. Against overwhelming odds, he would hold his position, embodying the resilience and sacrifice of the ordinary soldier thrust into extraordinary circumstances. By the beginning of 1945, after months of combat across France since the autumn of 1944, Bertoldo had demonstrated that impaired vision posed no barrier to bravery on the battlefield. He had advanced to the rank of Master Sergeant and had earned a reputation among his comrades as an unwavering soldier, one who never retreated, never complained, and never abandoned a wounded teammate. On the morning of January 9th, the town of Hatten had become increasingly dire. German artillery had been relentlessly bombarding the area for 2 days, leaving most of the town's structures in ruins. The battalion command post, which had been operating out of a sturdy stone building previously serving as the town hall, was preparing to relocate as enemy units approached. Lieutenant Colonel Guy O. Kurtz, in command of the 1st Battalion, faced the difficult task of ordering an evacuation of the headquarters during the night. To ensure the withdrawal of staff and the wounded, someone would need to provide covering fire. When the call for volunteers went out, Bertoldo stepped forward without hesitation. Bertoldo stepped forward without hesitation. As the remainder of the battalion began its movement at 2200 hours on January 8th, Bertoldo took up his position inside the command post. He inspected his ammunition and prepared mentally for what he anticipated might be his final engagement. He placed his .30 caliber Browning machine gun to command the narrow street that led directly to the town square, the main access route to the building. The weapon, mounted on a tripod and equipped with a water-cooled jacket, could fire between 450 and 600 rounds per minute, but Bertoldo's supply was limited to what could be retrieved from positions left behind. At 0347 hours on January 9th, a German patrol consisting of 6 soldiers cautiously advanced through the rubble-strewn street. Bertoldo allowed them to approach to within 30 yards before opening fire, a 3-second burst that felled all 6 men. Within moments, German fire, ranging from rifles and machine guns to mortars, poured into his position. According to official records accompanying his Medal of Honor citation, Bertoldo then executed an action that defied conventional military logic. He carried his machine gun outside into the open street and positioned it in full view of the enemy, illuminated by the surrounding fires. From this exposed location, he engaged flanking forces, continuing to fight despite heavy fire from small arms and 88mm weapons. For nearly 12 hours, from 0400 to 1600, Bertoldo maintained this extraordinary defensive stance. He repelled wave after wave of assaults while remaining in plain sight of advancing German forces, a feat corroborated by military documentation. As the afternoon progressed and daylight began to fade, German losses mounted. Enemy forces introduced armored support, a tank, positioning it to fire directly at Bertoldo's emplacement. The Medal of Honor citation recounts that one shell struck the building, throwing Bertoldo across the room, yet he returned immediately to his weapon. When 2 German personnel carriers, shielded by the tank, advanced toward him, Bertoldo waited for the soldiers to dismount before resuming fire, taking down more than half of the approaching infantry despite the tank targeting him. He subsequently repositioned his machine gun inside the command post, securing it to a table to continue firing through a window. When another wave of German troops approached behind the tank, he again waited until they were fully exposed before opening fire. Frustrated by this single determined defender, the tank commander ordered an assault at extremely close range. At approximately 75 yards, the tank fired directly into the command post. The explosion destroyed the weapon and sent Bertoldo sprawling across the room. Despite suffering multiple shrapnel injuries, he recovered and discovered a supply of white phosphorus grenades left behind during the evacuation, allowing him to continue his defense. When a fresh wave of German soldiers neared the structure, convinced that the prior tank assault had neutralized all opposition, Bertoldo remained alert and prepared.
Official records, including his Medal of Honor citation, note that despite enduring a relentless bombardment, he stayed at his station, deploying white phosphorus grenades at the advancing enemy until they were forced to retreat. During this engagement, a tank positioned less than 50 yards away targeted his position, obliterating his machine gun emplacement and throwing him across the room once more. Nevertheless, he resumed combat with a rifle, providing critical cover for his comrades as they withdrew when the post could no longer be held. By the morning of January 10th, Bertoldo had endured nearly continuous combat without sleep, proper nourishment, or rest. His body bore multiple injuries from shrapnel and explosive fragments. His glasses were shattered and crudely wired together, yet he remained operational. At approximately 00:15 hours, German forces launched another massive assault. The initial artillery fire was catastrophic, causing severe structural damage. Walls crumbled, the roof partially collapsed, and fires erupted throughout several rooms of the command post. According to the official battle history, Bertoldo persisted in his defense. Switching to an M1 Garand rifle, he utilized ammunition scavenged from fallen soldiers during brief pauses in the fighting. For the following 12 hours, he became a virtually invisible threat to the enemy, emerging at windows to fire precise shots before vanishing and reappearing at another vantage point. By midday, the original command post had become indefensible. Enemy forces had breached the perimeter, endangering the battalion's alternate command center located approximately 400 yards to the rear. Military accounts, including his Medal of Honor citation, record that Bertoldo made a remarkable decision to relocate to the secondary post in order to sustain the defensive effort. While stationed there, he continued to demonstrate extraordinary bravery, defending both positions against assaults from heavily armed infantry and armored units that had overrun the battalion's primary line of defense. Upon reaching the alternate command post, Bertoldo discovered a .30 caliber machine gun that had been abandoned and damaged. Despite its condition, he prepared it for action, ensuring he could maintain resistance against the advancing enemy. Throughout these critical hours, his actions exemplified sustained courage and tactical acumen, providing essential support for his unit while under constant threat from overwhelming enemy forces. Amid intense enemy fire, Master Sergeant Vito Bertoldo carried out critical field repairs on a weapon system, ensuring it could return to action. When German forces prepared what they believed would be a decisive assault, Bertoldo was fully positioned to confront them. The narrow lane leading toward the command post quickly turned into a deadly zone. For approximately 20 minutes, Bertoldo maintained continuous fire, halting the enemy's advance. According to his Medal of Honor citation, his efforts resulted in at least 40 German soldiers killed, with many more injured during the fierce engagement. By the night of January 10th, Bertoldo had been actively engaged in combat for over 48 hours without relief.
The official citation notes that Bertoldo faced overwhelming enemy numbers, repeatedly escaping death by mere inches, yet refused to abandon his post. In the early hours of January 11th, around 2 a.m., elements of the 14th Armored Division arrived as reinforcements, finally reaching the embattled town of Hatten. The Germans, trapped between the fresh American troops and the determined defenders, began a withdrawal. When relief forces entered the alternate command post, Bertoldo was discovered still manning his position, exhausted, barely conscious, and bearing injuries from shrapnel, burns, and prolonged exposure to gunfire, but he refused to leave until formally relieved. At first light on January 11th, as the full scope of the battle became clear, officers from divisional headquarters arrived to verify reports from the front. Records confirmed that Bertoldo had directly killed a minimum of 40 enemy soldiers, with countless others wounded. The 1st Battalion of the 242nd Infantry had begun the encounter with 33 officers and 748 enlisted men. By the conclusion, only 11 officers and 253 enlisted soldiers remained fit for combat. Colonel Hans von Luck, who commanded the 125th Regiment of the 21st Panzer Division at Hatten, would later describe the resistance in his memoirs as extraordinarily fierce, ranking among the most brutal and costly engagements on the Western Front. Following the battle, Bertoldo was evacuated to the 45th Field Hospital, where he received treatment for multiple shrapnel injuries, burns, and concussions caused by explosions. He had lost considerable weight over the course of the two-day ordeal, and his hands were severely burned from prolonged handling of the overheated machine gun. Fellow soldiers visited him during recovery, eager to meet the man credited with single-handedly halting a German offensive, though Bertoldo consistently minimized his role, insisting he had merely fulfilled his duty. On December 18, 1945, in a White House ceremony, President Harry S. Truman awarded Master Sergeant Vito Bertoldo the Medal of Honor. The event honored 6 recipients in total, with General Dwight D. Eisenhower in attendance, having requested a meeting with the sergeant whose courage had become legendary across the European theater. During the presentation, President Truman remarked, "You embody the finest qualities of America, demonstrating unwavering commitment to duty despite overwhelming odds." The Medal of Honor citation, formally issued in War Department General Orders No. 5 on January 10, 1946, emphasized Bertoldo's extraordinary bravery. He had defended 2 command posts against a coordinated attack by superior infantry and armored units, despite the battalion's primary defensive line being overrun. His actions, sustained over more than 2 full days of continuous combat, exemplified exceptional valor under the most extreme circumstances.
Master Sergeant Vito Rocco Bertoldo demonstrated extraordinary courage and unwavering resolve during one of the fiercest engagements of his military career. Facing an enemy force far larger than his own, he held his ground for more than 2 full days without rest or reinforcements. Throughout this relentless confrontation, Bertoldo narrowly escaped death on multiple occasions, while successfully neutralizing at least 40 enemy combatants and inflicting injuries on many others. His remarkable fortitude and tactical skill earned him the respect of both his peers and superiors. After being discharged in February 1946, Bertoldo was appointed by the President to serve as a representative for the Veterans Administration. He began his post-military career in Chicago, where for 1 year he assisted returning servicemen and women in navigating the often complex bureaucracy required to secure their entitled benefits. In 1947, he transferred to the VA office in San Francisco, dedicating over a decade to the same mission. Bertoldo focused particularly on veterans facing disabilities and those grappling with psychological trauma from combat, drawing on his own battlefield experiences to guide and advocate for them. His advocacy was marked by the same relentless determination he had exhibited in battle. In 1958, Bertoldo left the Veterans Administration to establish a landscaping business in Marin County, California. His business quickly gained a reputation for tackling projects others considered unfeasible, such as converting rugged, rocky terrain into flourishing gardens. Employees recalled his extraordinary work ethic, often laboring under the hot California sun for 12-hour shifts without complaint. This physically demanding work seemed to offer him a measure of peace and purpose, helping him manage the lingering effects of wartime experiences. Bertoldo married Patricia in 1952, following the end of his first marriage in 1950. Together, they created a stable family environment. Bertoldo's son, David Valor Bertoldo, born in 1946, would later serve in the U.S. Marine Corps during the Vietnam War, earning a Bronze Star Medal for his own distinguished service. David remembered his father as a man of few words regarding the war, yet his heroic reputation was well known among fellow veterans. Vito Bertoldo kept his Medal of Honor privately, stored in a cigar box in his dresser, rather than displaying it publicly, though his name commanded respect throughout California's veteran community. The tradition of military service continued with David's son David Christopher Bertoldo, who served in the U.S. Army during the Gulf War, marking 3 successive generations of family service to the nation. In early 1966, Bertoldo received a diagnosis of advanced lung cancer. True to his character,
He approached his illness methodically, seeking out treatments and maintaining a strict schedule of medical appointments. Despite his resolve, the disease proved insurmountable. On July 23, 1966, Master Sergeant Vito Bertoldo passed away at the VA hospital in Martinez, California, at the age of 49. He was interred with full military honors at Golden Gate National Cemetery in San Bruno, California, Section C, Grave 52A. The funeral drew over 500 attendees, including family, friends, veterans, and military officials. The 42nd Infantry Division provided an honor guard in recognition of his extraordinary service. In the eulogy, emphasis was placed not only on his battlefield heroism, but also on his lifelong dedication to supporting fellow veterans. Colonel Guy O. Kurtz, Bertoldo's former battalion commander, summarized his legacy succinctly. Vito Bertoldo proved that one individual can truly make a difference. At Hatten, every instinct seemed to demand retreat. Logic advised withdrawal. The urge for self-preservation screamed for escape, and the overwhelming strength of the enemy suggested surrender. Yet, Master Sergeant Vito Bertoldo refused to yield. His resolve was not driven by ambition or the pursuit of recognition, but by the responsibility he felt toward the soldiers depending on him. The Battle of Hatten has been extensively analyzed by military historians, with Bertoldo's role repeatedly highlighted as exemplary. The defensive actions at Hatten played a significant part in the ultimate failure of Operation Nordwind. German units, particularly the 21st Panzer Division and the 25th Panzer Grenadier Division, incurred such heavy losses at Hatten that they never fully regained their combat efficiency. Bertoldo's conduct has been used as a benchmark in studies of defensive operations within the U.S. Army. His tactical use of mobility within a static position, disciplined employment of fire, and the ability to sustain combat effectiveness under severe injury and exhaustion have become integral lessons at infantry training programs. The official history of U.S. operations in Europe notes, the defense mounted at Hatten exemplified American infantry at its peak. Soldiers like Master Sergeant Vito Bertoldo demonstrated that determined defenders occupying favorable terrain could hold back even elite enemy formations. In 2018, Netflix brought Bertoldo's story to a wider audience through its Medal of Honor documentary series. The episode combined archival military documentation, expert interviews, and reenactments to reconstruct the critical 48-hour defense at Hatten. Lieutenant Colonel Shaw Flynn, current operations officer of the 42nd Infantry Division, remarked in the program, "Bertoldo's stand is timeless. It underscores that the core strength of the American military resides not in equipment or numbers, but in the determination of individual soldiers who refuse to give in even when every signal says they should." Recently declassified after-action reports featured in the documentary confirmed the staggering casualties inflicted by Bertoldo. German records indicate that the losses suffered during assaults on his position were equivalent to what would be expected from the coordinated resistance of an entire platoon, not a single soldier. Hatten itself has preserved the memory of Bertoldo's heroism. When the town commemorated the battle's 50th anniversary in 1995, a monument was unveiled at the site of his stand. The bilingual plaque reads, "Here, Master Sergeant Vito Bertoldo, United States Army, held firm against overwhelming odds, proving that courage has no boundaries." Every year on January 9th, residents, veterans, and historians gather for a ceremony honoring those who fought there. The 75th anniversary in 2020 attracted participants from across Europe and the United States.
The U.S. Army continues to honor Bertoldo's example through the Bertoldo Award, presented annually by the 42nd Infantry Division to a soldier demonstrating exceptional initiative and courage in adverse circumstances. This award serves as a reminder that individual valor can still decisively influence the outcome of modern military operations. Records of Bertoldo's engagement at Hatten detail 48 hours of continuous combat. He endured more than 50 hours without sleep, with minimal food and water. His adversaries included elements of the 21st Panzer Division and the 25th Panzer Grenadier Division, supported by multiple infantry companies and armored vehicles. Bertoldo personally caused the deaths of at least 40 enemy combatants, with many more wounded. He sustained multiple shrapnel injuries, burns to his hands from the overheated barrel of his machine gun, and concussion effects from tank fire, earning the Purple Heart for his sacrifices. Strategically, his defense prevented a breakthrough of the battalion line, contributing to the failure of Operation Nordwind and saving countless American lives. Bertoldo's legacy endures in multiple institutions. The Bertoldo Foundation, established by his family in 2000, offers scholarships to the children of veterans and funds research into combat-related PTSD. Over 300 students have benefited from its support, while the foundation has also advanced important studies on trauma experienced by soldiers. Fort Benning's Infantry School incorporates Bertoldo's scenario into its training curriculum, challenging officer candidates to study his tactical decisions, position selection, disciplined fire, and ability to maintain effectiveness under extreme stress. In France, the Hatten Museum maintains a dedicated exhibit on the battle, with Bertoldo's section attracting thousands of visitors each year. The displays, including maps, photographs, and personal accounts, allow new generations to understand and appreciate the magnitude of his actions during those intense 2 days at Hatten. Although Bertoldo's military exploits are well recorded, his contributions after the war were equally significant, albeit less widely publicized. Between 1947 and 1958, he dedicated himself to assisting thousands of veterans in navigating the complex processes of the Veterans Administration, VA. He was especially adept at advocating for those struggling with service-related injuries and psychological trauma. Colleagues at the San Francisco VA recall him as relentless, never accepting bureaucratic obstacles when pursuing benefits on behalf of veterans. His personal experiences at Hatten lent him a credibility few administrators could question. He knew the inner workings of military bureaucracy, but he also deeply understood the lasting human toll of combat. In 1962, Bertoldo provided testimony before Congress, emphasizing the urgent need for expanded mental health resources for combat veterans. Although the term post-traumatic stress disorder had not yet entered medical parlance, he accurately described the invisible psychological wounds soldiers carried home. His advocacy played a pivotal role in broadening mental health services within VA hospitals, ultimately benefiting generations of veterans in the decades that followed.
The Battle of Hatten itself has been extensively examined in both German and French military scholarship. Colonel Hans von Luck, in his memoir Panzer Commander, recounts the fierce engagement, noting the severe losses suffered by his regiment. He praised the American defense, describing key positions that should have fallen rapidly as holding out for hours or even days. French historians have similarly analyzed the battle, highlighting the extensive destruction of Hatten and the tragic toll on civilians. Dr. Jean-Paul Belliard, a prominent French military historian, emphasized that the defenders' efforts prevented a much larger catastrophe, saving countless lives while holding critical positions. Soldiers like Sergeant Bertoldo played a decisive role in protecting French civilians from the potential devastation of a German breakthrough. The engagement at Hatten is now widely studied in military education as a classic example of defensive warfare. Analysis at institutions such as West Point focuses on several lessons: the impact of individual initiative during defensive operations, the psychological effect of determined resistance on attacking forces, the strategic value of mobility within a defensive posture, and the critical importance of position selection and fields of fire. Bertoldo's actions are incorporated into West Point's examination of Medal of Honor recipients, illustrating personal courage and tactical decision-making under extreme duress. The Naval Academy and the Air Force Academy include similar studies, while international military academies, such as the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst in the UK and Germany's Bundeswehr Officer School, analyze the battle as part of broader strategic lessons, including the failure of Operation Nordwind. Although Bertoldo survived Hatten, the psychological aftermath persisted. His second wife, Patricia, later recounted that he experienced recurring nightmares and symptoms now recognized as PTSD, often waking disoriented and momentarily believing he was back in combat. Despite these ongoing struggles, he maintained his composure and commitment to service, channeling his own experiences into support for other veterans. For Bertoldo, working at the VA was not merely employment, it was an extension of his military service, a continuation of his lifelong dedication to the men and women who had shared the battlefield with him. Friends and relatives often described him as someone who seldom dwelt on his own hardships, yet showed relentless determination when defending others. This remarkable selflessness, first observed during the Battle of Hatten, persisted throughout his lifetime. He transformed the trauma of combat into a driving purpose, channeling his personal suffering into empathy and support for fellow veterans. The lessons from his actions are embedded in the United States Army's current infantry field manual. Contemporary defensive strategies emphasize constructing well-prepared positions with multiple firing angles, ensuring that soldiers are trained to maintain their weapons and technical skills to the highest standard. Commanders recognize the profound psychological impact that determined resistance can have on the enemy and prioritize mental resilience training. Special operations units continue to study historical instances where a single soldier successfully defended critical positions against numerically superior forces. Bertoldo's ability to sustain operational effectiveness under extreme stress for 2 consecutive days is closely examined to better understand human endurance under combat conditions. Modern training programs aim to cultivate the type of mental toughness and perseverance that Bertoldo exemplified. Even as technology has transformed warfare, the core importance of individual bravery and steadfastness remains unchanged. During the 75th anniversary observance in 2020, Major General Thomas Vandal of the 42nd Infantry Division highlighted Bertoldo's enduring legacy. He noted that Master Sergeant Bertoldo's heroism illustrates that extraordinary courage is revealed in moments of extreme crisis rather than being innate. A soldier whose formal role was that of a cook, Bertoldo overcame initial rejection from combat due to poor eyesight and ultimately became one of the most highly decorated figures of the war. His actions, holding off 2 elite German divisions, demonstrate that even ordinary individuals can achieve remarkable feats when circumstances demand it.
During the 75th anniversary observance in 2020, Major General Thomas Vandal of the 42nd Infantry Division highlighted Bertoldo's enduring legacy. He noted that Master Sergeant Bertoldo's heroism illustrates that extraordinary courage is revealed in moments of extreme crisis rather than being innate. A soldier whose formal role was that of a cook, Bertoldo overcame initial rejection from combat due to poor eyesight and ultimately became one of the most highly decorated figures of the war. His actions, holding off 2 elite German divisions, demonstrate that even ordinary individuals can achieve remarkable feats when circumstances demand. Dennis Reinhardt, Bertoldo's nephew, attended the ceremony and shared family recollections, emphasizing that Bertoldo never regarded himself as a hero. He always said he simply did what needed to be done, Reinhardt recalled. Yet his decisions saved countless lives and altered the course of events. Our family is honored to continue carrying his name and legacy. Bertoldo's story continues to reach new audiences through books, documentaries, and military curricula. His example resonates because it embodies universal values: duty, courage, self-sacrifice, and determination. Young soldiers visiting the Hatten battlefield can physically trace the narrow streets and limited fields of fire that shaped his defense. By examining what one individual accomplished in such a setting, they gain insight into their own potential and capacity for resilience. Veterans from more recent conflicts, including Iraq and Afghanistan, also find inspiration in Bertoldo's experience. They understand the exhaustion, fear, and moral decisions involved in close-quarters urban combat, recognizing the discipline required to continue fighting when retreat would be reasonable. What makes Bertoldo's story timeless is its broad relatability. He was not a career soldier, did not come from a military lineage, and was initially deemed unfit for combat due to poor vision. Yet, when circumstances demanded it, he displayed extraordinary resolve. His narrative teaches that heroism is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. It is not about possessing superhuman skill, but about persisting when giving up would be understandable. It is not about seeking recognition, but about protecting those who rely on you. Master Sergeant Bertoldo's 48-hour defense at Hatten stands as one of the most remarkable individual feats in American military history. Official records document the scale of his achievement. He single-handedly defended 2 command posts against elements of 2 elite German divisions, inflicted at least 40 enemy casualties, and wounded numerous others, all while remaining on duty without rest or relief. His actions were directly instrumental in halting Germany's final major offensive on the Western Front. Beyond the statistics, his story underscores the enduring importance of individual courage. Bertoldo demonstrated that one person can influence the course of events, and that steadfast determination can overcome seemingly insurmountable odds.
His legacy endures not only in military archives, but also in the lives of the people he saved, the veterans he mentored, and the countless individuals inspired by his example. In an era dominated by advanced weaponry, drone operations, and cyber warfare, Bertoldo's experience remains strikingly relevant, serving as a reminder that personal valor and resilience continue to shape history. Technology evolves, yet the essence of the warrior endures. The core difficulties of combat, grappling with fear, confronting fatigue, weighing personal safety against duty, remain unchanged across generations. Modern military doctrine acknowledges that even with advanced weaponry and communications, the outcome of war often hinges on the judgment and resolve of individual soldiers operating under intense pressure. The Bertoldo's actions offer a striking illustration of such judgment under duress. General Mark Rodriguez, who currently commands the 42nd Infantry Division, stresses that every service member should be familiar with Bertoldo's story, not because each soldier is expected to achieve feats worthy of the Medal of Honor, but because his conduct exemplifies the extraordinary possibilities inherent in ordinary individuals who refuse to surrender. How did one man manage to hold off several hundred enemy troops for 2 full days? Analysts have scrutinized the encounter from every angle. Some elements, however, resist straightforward explanation. His precision, despite broken eyewear, his physical stamina well beyond typical human capacity, and his mental focus in the face of relentless exhaustion. Even with contemporary insights into combat performance, these feats remain astonishing.
The explanation may not rest solely in tactical skill or physical conditioning, but rather in something more elemental: unwavering commitment. Bertoldo had resolved with absolute determination to maintain his position. All other concerns, pain, fear, fatigue, became subordinate to that decision. His story extends beyond 48 hours of relentless fighting. It encompasses a life shaped by hardship and loss, the resolve to serve despite personal limitations, the courage to confront overwhelming odds, and a lifelong dedication to supporting fellow veterans. Through this lens, Bertoldo emerges not only as a soldier, but as an ordinary American whose choices reverberated far beyond his immediate circumstances. Ultimately, Bertoldo's stand at Hatten is more than a tale of battlefield heroism.
It demonstrates the potential for extraordinary courage to manifest in unexpected places, the power of individual determination to influence the course of events, and the profound costs that freedom demands. Master Sergeant Vito Bertoldo passed away believing he had merely fulfilled his duty. History, however, interprets it differently. At Hatten, over a 48-hour period, he became more than a combatant. He embodied the line itself, the threshold separating success from failure, advance from containment. The German troops, anticipating a conventional defensive position, instead encountered an unyielding force in human form. The actions of one man challenged every expectation and conventional calculation of military engagement. Historical narratives often highlight large-scale clashes involving thousands of participants, yet critical moments sometimes pivot on the resolve of a single individual. At Hatten, in January 1945, Bertoldo essentially declared "no further," and for 2 days, against overwhelming numbers and impossible odds, he ensured that statement became reality. The empirical record confirms the extraordinary nature of his defense. One sergeant manning a single machine gun, holding the line for 48 hours, inflicting at least 40 enemy casualties. From a purely statistical perspective, such resistance should have been unfeasible. Bertoldo, however, neither considered the improbability nor allowed it to dictate his actions. He simply executed his duty with relentless focus. In that steadfastness, the essence of heroism is evident, not in pursuit of recognition, but in the unwavering fulfillment of responsibility, under circumstances that would have crushed almost anyone else.